All right, let's get some testimony, see what folks have to say. Mr. Luberg, City of Stockton.
Good afternoon. As you expect, we do have some concern with this provision. One concern that we have that appears to be, it arises mostly in this context, is that when you address general plans as current general plans, it has the effect of freezing these affected cities and counties in time. We have a general plan that will designate various land uses within a sphere of influence within a planning area, but that only goes out to 2035. That seems like a long way away, but it's really not. So our concern is going to be not only the effect of this provision generally, but the effect it's going to have on these communities in the future, in their economic growth, their ability to meet their housing goals. These are real effects. You have a significant number of people, particularly in Stockton, living within the secondary zone. And so our concern is that you consider that very strongly, because we already have challenges as it is. We have a very difficult road ahead of us. And having the sort of artificial barrier on any growth within this area is a significant concern for us. This is separate and apart from our concerns regarding inclusion of certain limitations within the secondary zone anyway. This is our covered action issue that we've discussed at quite a bit of length. But this appears to be even more distinct than that, because it appears to actually stunt development in the long term. I would have definitely have a concern with that. The second is the language designate. A general plan designates. This is problematic, I think, and it's vague, frankly. Because general plans deal with a lot of different areas. They deal with areas that are current growth. They deal with long-term growth, and there's a planning area which is significantly larger than even the area designated for growth within the current draft of the general plan, or the current version of the general plan. So how you would define designate it is also problematic for us, because it doesn't give us clarity as to what you actually mean, even for purposes
don't you mean you do have clarity, and it does not include the land that you once had in the sphere of influence, 2,400 acres, that you have removed from the sphere of influence, but the mayor in a letter some months ago said, gee, we might like to put it back in the future, and you ought to grandfather that too.
Well,
I mean, that's what we're specifically talking about.
Well, but the language in the provision is uncertain, because it talks about designations in general plans. Then it talks about spheres. Spheres are very different things. You can designate areas outside of the sphere in your general plan that you deal with on a long-term basis, or address on a long-term basis. Your sphere is only the area that you would propose to develop within a more modest amount of time, because the general plan can go much longer than the current sphere might necessarily allow, at least in terms of policies or future indicated policies. So our concern is that when you say designate, that is a little uncertain for me, just from a standpoint of trying to address that and being able to inform my client what you're saying. Because if you mean sphere of influence, and that's it, meaning anything outside of the current sphere, then that's a very different kettle of fish even than talking about just the general plan.
Does the city of Stockton or any city legally control land use outside its city limits or sphere of influence?
No.
Okay. Does the city of Stockton control the decisions of property owners in those territories outside the city limits and the sphere of influence?
No, but that's a different topic. Because
but you asked us,
we could plan those areas.
As I understood the mayor's letters, you were essentially asking for an exemption for any property you would at any time in the future seek to place in a sphere of influence or within your city limits, and you wish that to be done automatically. I may have stated it incorrectly, but I don't think so.
There's really two issues. One of them is covered actions, and we've been addressing that extensively. This is actually quite different, because this, as it appears to me, is placing an urban growth boundary around every community in the primary, in the secondary zone and the primary zone.
Right.
It would appear to have the legal effect of attempting to do that.
That's certainly one way to describe it. Another way is to tell the city of Stockton to stop developing in land that is flood prone and stop taking agricultural land out of production. Neither may be the correct statement, but there are a lot of reasons for land use decisions.
On this, the early development of the current general plan that the City of Stockton has had a planning area that included all or parts of 4 islands in the primary zone. So would you want to be permitted to plan that area for urbanization?
That's not what I'm here to advocate for, because that
I know, but
the city.
The policy of City of Stockton was to plan for an area much greater than its current boundaries or its sphere of influence, so large that it invaded the primary zone, not on the margin, but in great swaths.
Well, every city's general plan has a planning area that's significantly outside of its area of intended development.
But since the Delta Protection Act, I know of no jurisdiction that did what Stockton attempted to do.
Well, I can't speak to that particular policy change. What I'm speaking to is this particular provision. And what this provision would do is not just say you can't plan irresponsibly, as might be defined within some state guideline. It's saying you can't plan at all.
Well, does Stockton intend to develop in the future in the secondary zone north of the current areas that are rather extensive and currently, not built out?
That's not something I can answer today, because that would require an action of the council to
do you believe that your city is desirous of reserving the right to plan and potentially urbanize the areas beyond what it currently has and what's in its sphere of influence?
Well, what I'm prepared to advocate is that the council, the city, whoever that body may be at the time, we're talking several, perhaps 20 years in the future, would have the ability to address that then. What you're doing with this policy, or attempting to do, is to say that no future city council, regardless of what other state policies may have intervened to require other exigencies regarding housing development or other development, you cannot grow here.
No, you would be required to come to the council. Presumably you'd ask us to amend the Delta plan. I know you would prefer not to, but isn't that the way to solve unrealized but kind of dreamed for future ideas?
Yeah. As I read the policy, what it's attempting to do is to end planning in the future beyond current general plan boundaries. That's what it says.
Let's see, where's the language that prohibits you from planning whatever you want?
Well,
just point it out to me in this language.
It says development beyond current general plan.
That's okay, but that's Mr. Johnston's point. You are seeking to develop. It's not the planning. You're planning. You could plan to take over all of San Joaquin County.
But on the policy itself, if you look at the map, in fact, Stockton has large open areas to the north and to the east, less so to the south, that are not in the secondary zone. I mean, relatively little is in the delta, is in the statutory delta. So on the substance or the merit of the policy, the question is what little amount that overlaps between the desire of Stockton someday, if its economy ever supports building out all of which has been approved, it still, 20 years from now, wants to build more, that it must have this little piece in the delta when it has, looks like thousands of acres around it that's not in the delta.
My concern with the policy language is that as it's read, it limits the city of Stockton and any other city or county within this secondary zone with regard to future development that is outside of its current general plan boundaries. And that is, I'm not going to debate the merits of to you about development in the Delta or not, because those are policy decisions for others in the future. My concern is as the plan reads now, it has the likely long-term effect of stunting growth within Stockton.
Yeah, that is certainly our intention is that, as Chairman Eisenberg said, in those situations then that a local government that wanted to develop beyond the boundaries that are currently designated for development in its general plan, that would then return to the council to see if they could see.
Right. I mean, that's true, certainly. But really, your conclusion, I agree with your characterization. This is a limitation on Stockton sometime in the future without other change of the Delta plan to permit development in that small area that remains in the statutory delta that Stockton hasn't already permitted and built out, which it has done thousands of acres, and it's done it in recent years. So it's not legacy, it's post-1992. And much of it has not been developed at all. So that's true, I would characterize that. But the conclusion that it stunts Stockton's growth, it
has the potential to,
well,
what I'm saying.
Well, it means that some developer can't go all the way to the west into the Delta and build a project that might have more economic value than the thousands of acres that are available between Stockton and Lodi and east of Stockton. Right?
Those are policy areas
right.
You're delving into that are choices that other councils may wish to address. I can't say which way they will address them.
Okay.
But I think it's important to identify the effect, which is to take what is currently the purview of local government to plan within the boundaries of their expected growth over an extended period of time, and essentially taking an area and placing it completely off limits. That's the effect of this. And then obviously we're going to have a concern with that. To characterize all development that would be done in the future as being irresponsible or somehow choices that are purely economic, those are policy choices for others to make. I can't argue one way or the other because I don't know what they would choose to do. However, I am concerned that this represents a very significant limitation on our current ability to plan for the future. And that's how we would characterize our objection.
Yes, Ms. Marcus, I'm sorry.
Can we move to the next speaker?
Okay, thank you.